I think what we're going to do is start. Kelly, who you'll see on the screen, is going to manage this whole thing fitting together neatly, and we'll let people in. So thanks for doing that, Kelly. It's a real privilege to spend time in this guise with you, Edwin, and with all you lovely folks who've turned up. So thanks for coming along and sharing in this conversation. So just to kind of set a bit of a frame for it, we'll go 60 minutes. There won't be a break. We'll stay on mute. We're going to allow some time, maybe 10 or 15 minutes towards the end for some questions. So if you have questions that you want to ask, hold them or pop them in the chat throughout, and we'll find a way to get to them at the end. As we go along, there might be some links that we plan to talk about or end up talking about, in which case Kelly is an absolute marvel at finding the relevant links, and they will all go into the chat. So anything that you want or need will be popped into the chat. So grab it as we go. Welcome. It's great to see some familiar faces and some faces that I've seen on some of Edwin's workshops before. So you're all very welcome. Thank you for giving us some time. I hope it will be a valuable 60 minutes. I guess a bit of context for why the session came about. I launched a book last week, and I'll talk in a moment about my relationship with cancer over the last 2.5 years. But what I noticed in the last couple of years is a lot of people have asked me, how have you managed this journey? How have you found a way through, spiritually, physically, psychologically, emotionally? Lots of people would often describe how both Kelly and I and our daughter Mia have kind of moved through with using the term ease and grace. And how have you done that in a time that feels so brutal, so actually so harrowing? And many people say, where do you get your support from? How has this happened? How have you gone from being given such an aggressive cancer diagnosis and told that you had 3 months to live to still being here? I think some people actually go, are you still here? But I definitely am. And I know that some things I can answer about where I found support, and some things I absolutely can't. And therefore, having Edwin here to help me and guide some of the conversation feels vital. So look, this evening is a conversation. There's no sell. There's no big teach. We just want to share some of our wisdom, insight, experience. Maybe you are yourself currently on a path that feels treacherous. Maybe you feel as if you are in free fall, or you are in descent, or maybe you know someone who is. So I hope there'll be lots in it for you. So some of you will be very familiar with our story, really, of the last 2.5 years, and some of you won't. And I want to touch on some of the points because it's really important and sets some of the foundations for our conversation. So I am currently in remission from a stage 4 blood cancer. It's a cancer called mantle cell. December the 7th, 2021 was the day when I received a shocking diagnosis. And I guess where my relationship with, I suppose, entering what felt like an abyss, what felt like a place of darkness, started. And there's obviously a lot more in the book to read about here, but I do want to just talk through some of the key touchstones. I'm really aware of how difficult I find it to talk about this. So I'm noticing right now my heart going a lot. And I've done quite a lot of PR for the book in the last few weeks. And I noticed that when I start to get back into the story, how much residue there is from the last 2.5 years. So bear with me. For weeks, I couldn't say I had cancer. I don't know. I think it was probably a month or 2 before I actually said the words, I have cancer. That for me, there were weeks and weeks once I got the diagnosis of stillness and silence. For someone who reads a lot, listens to a lot of music, watches films, likes engaging in conversation and learning, I wanted none of it. I felt like I sat on the sofa for weeks apart from going to the hospital to have treatment pretty much every day or every other day, I stayed in this place of silence because I didn't quite know what to do with what I'd just been told. And I had to tell a 16-year-old that her dad had an aggressive cancer. And that was the hardest thing I've had to say in my life. It was one of the toughest days of my life. And Kelly and I both work for ourselves. And there were those very immediate questions of, how the hell do we survive? How do we pay a mortgage? How to put food on the table? There was no way I was going to be able to work. The treatment was brutal. It was grueling. It was 3-day inpatient stays. I knew that even once I was through chemo, I would then have a stem cell transplant to live through, which would be a month in hospital in an isolated room, no visitors, where they basically annihilate your body and start again. And having used my own cells that are then cleaned and shoved back into my body, I had a sense that there were some tough times ahead. The stem cell transplant, knowing that was in front of me, it was a grueling month, and they often refer to it as a physical rebirth, and I think with any rebirth or any aspect of ourselves that is new and refreshed and adapted, we can't avoid looking at the other parts of our own system. So whilst there was a physical rebirth, there has also had to be a psychological rebirth, an emotional rebirth, a spiritual birthing maybe, or rebirth, or transformation or transition in there. And they have all come at different times, but I think that's really important in our conversation this evening, that people talk about weight loss. Well, we can't have physical adaptation if we don't also have psychological, emotional, spiritual adaptation to go with it. Otherwise, the system becomes unstable. So that's been really important for me. There have been lots of times where it felt like there's no hope. I don't know if I have the right resources. I haven't always known if I've had the right people around. And I think when we find ourselves in a place of dissent, of despair, of perhaps enormous loss or grief, those elements become vital to us about who are our kin, who are the people in our community, our ability to ask for help, our ability to be able to find the resources that we need. And we were very fortunate to be doing this cancer journey with people around us, with a community that appeared. Some were already there and some just appeared, almost in a miracle-like form. But I think we sat down, and in the first couple of weeks were very aware of how there are a lot of people who take themselves off to chemo each day. They jump on a tube or a train or a bus with a pillow under their arm, and it's a lonely and isolated adventure. And how do those people cope as they fly solo? I've spent much of my life being a people pleaser and wanting to be of service to others. And at 59, I found myself in this place going, how am I of service to myself now? And how do I ask for the support and the input and the kindness and the love that actually I had a sense I so desperately need in order to be with the darkness? That felt very important. It was an enormous time of surrender, and we decided that we would build a relationship with cancer. So a lot of people have rolled their eyes or kind of have a blank expression when I say that. There's a lot of mentality around cancer that is kind of the fuck cancer camp, and I don't. That isn't wrong. People have to do it, go through it in their own way. But for us, that wasn't right. I didn't feel having that energy of, fuck cancer, kill cancer. That just wasn't the way that this was going to work for us. And we felt like we needed to open the door to cancer, let it in, give it a seat at the table, and start to build a relationship with it. And I think that's important if we're thinking about dissent or freefall or our darkness or our deepest despair, that we at least hold the possibility of building a relationship with it. and giving it a seat at the table, I think we often create more challenge and difficulty for ourselves when we tend just to push it away. Um, so having already met Edwin a few years before, this was the point when Edwin started to make a much bigger impact in my life. And I had met Edwin through the College of Psychic Studies. I'd gone along, my wife is a trustee there, and we'd gone along to this talk. And I mean, I'm really open and curious and intrigued. And I met this man called Edwin, and I had this rather fascinating evening of going, well, that's all very interesting and all slightly odd. And I didn't have a place to hold it or put it because I didn't have a language to understand it, and I didn't have a lived experience of it. Um, I know that in the last 2.5 years, Edwin has gifted me and Kelly and Mia knowledge. He's gifted us wisdom. He's gifted us love and kindness in abundance, and has through all of this offered me continuous healing, which I think has been a central part of how I have managed to recover. And I say recover and heal from a cancer that is incurable. So I will always be under the care of my team. I have a cancer that has a high propensity to come back. So this healing journey I'm on, I will be remaining on. So really, Edwin's work has helped me unlock, I think, a soul connection, a connection. I talk about it as this kind of journeying back home to my true nature, to my true essence, to myself with a capital S. It's helped me with finding some creative expression, opening not just my mind, but opening my heart, and connecting back with who I am at source. And I, for some people that they won't want or find a way to be able to make space for that in their journey. For me, I believe it's been vital to my healing, and therefore we wanted to have this session because we wanted to understand more about it and also share more through Edwin's lens of how this work comes to bear and why this work is so vital. So I'm going to hand over to Edwin. Edwin is lots of wonderful things, and he downplays it, and he'll go, I'm not really, but he absolutely is. He's a marvelous soul, and I consider him to be a spiritual mentor. He is a medium. He is a channeler. He is a cunning folk. So Edwin, I'm going to bring you in and let you talk a bit, and I'd love to know a bit about how this journey of your own journey started. Give us a bit of background to that, and when specifically, and how specifically you started to bring healing into the work that you do.
Okay, thank you very much. So my spiritual journey, I suppose, started when I was 5. That's when I had my first remembered clairvoyant experience. My grandmother, she died when I was 5, and then she came and visited me at school, appearing by the Ladybird books, and smiled at me, and I told all my teachers that I'd seen her, and they patted me on the head because they knew that she'd died recently. And I went home to my mum and told her, and my mum said, well, that's your imagination, dear. But she never said, but that should stop. So from then on, the visions that I had a word for them, and that was my imagination. And I continued seeing all sorts of things right up until the age of 12, when I went to secondary school and realized that nobody else there was talking to imaginary friends. So I repressed it, closed it all down. And then when I was 16, I started to realize that maybe what I'd been experiencing as a child wasn't imagination, but maybe it was psychical phenomena. So I started doing research into it, and then I started to develop it. My parents, both of them are dead now, they're in spirit, were very, very unusual parents, in the sense that for my 16th birthday, they bought me a crystal ball, and for my 18th birthday, they bought me a Ouija board. And so they were very happy for me to kind of explore these things without any kind of qualms or fears. So I think probably when I was about 18 or 19, when I'd started to explore spiritualism and mediumship, I had a friend who I'd known since I was 5, and he'd had a bereavement. His brother had died from meningitis. And so he'd started to explore spiritualism as well. And he was a bit further down the road than I was. Ironically, now he's completely abandoned all that. He thinks it's all phooey. But he did me a reading when I was 18. And in the reading, he said, somebody gives you a dead rose and you hold it in your hands and the rose springs back to life, or you've got a healing gift. So I just thought, oh, I've got a healing gift. That's nice. And so then started to explore that. I didn't question it in any way, shape, or form. I just went on to investigate it, and I read books on it, and I did a few courses on it. And because I'd been told I had the gift, and because when I started to explore it, people seemed to respond when I laid my hands on them, I thought that it was one of the things that I should do. And so for a long time, when I started teaching professionally when I was 20, I started very early, I offered readings and teaching, and I offered healing. And I'd made this kind of bargain with my spiritual team that if they looked after me, if they brought me reading clients and workshop clients, then I would give the healing for free. That's the kind of deal we made. So for a long time, I saw clients at the end of the day, in between my lunch break, and they came to me and I gave them healing for free. And I had lots of different clients with lots of different problems, some really difficult problems, some really difficult clients. And after a while, I realized that although people were getting benefit from the healing, I didn't think I was terribly good at it, in the sense that I didn't feel particularly compassionate or loving towards these people. More often than not, when they sat there in front of me and told me about their problems, I thought, oh, for goodness sake, why are you whittering on about your problems? If you think you've got problems, try living in my life. And then I thought after a while, yeah, probably I shouldn't really be doing this. So I stopped for quite some time, just focused on the reading and the teaching. But it just kind of kept creeping back in. It crept into the teaching, and then I did a little bit of absent healing, and then I did a little bit of sound healing. And then I kind of hit upon the fact that absent healing was perfect for me, because I wasn't in the room with the client. I wasn't becoming dragged into their drama. I wasn't feeling the pressure of their expectation. I was just free to do the healing, send the healing, be the best channel for the healing that I could be. And when I started doing that, I started to get fantastic feedback from people who were having incredible experiences with it. Now, where it's evolved to now, I used to be a very doing healer. I used to look at people's energy systems and tune into people and fiddle with their chakras and mess about with their aura. And I was very mechanically minded. I've always very interested in metaphysics and mechanics and the energy system. And I'd been trained as a doing healer. I'd done Reiki, which is very doing as a healing practice, and I'd done spiritual healing, which was all about balancing the chakras and the meridians and the subtle bodies. But suddenly when I was doing the absent healing, it had turned into more being witness to the healing happening. So now when I send the absent healing, I take myself into a space where I'm open to the energies that want to work through me. And then I just kind of witness what's going on, and I allow it to kind of happen through me as much as I can. And then I report back that to the clients. So I very much now feel that my role as an absent healer is to witness the process of the healing that's taking place on behalf of the client. And by doing that, I'm kind of grounding the healing for the client as well. And on top of that, I will share my understanding or the guidance or inspiration that comes to me from spirit. And because I've been teaching for 33 years now, I've developed a kind of catalogue of information about crystals and herbs and body-mind connection and psychology and metaphysics and quantum physics. And I can kind of throw all that into the mix, guided by spirit, in order to tailor make, I think, guidance for people, and hopefully provide them with some help and assistance. And I suppose the last thing I kind of want to say is, at the moment, one thing I've noticed with my client roster is, cancer's on the rise. It's becoming incredibly prevalent. I think the NHS say now that 1 in 2 people will experience some kind of cancer in their life. And each year, each 6 months, each 3 months, more and more and more people are coming forward with some form of cancer. So I have a lot of clients on my absent healing list with cancer, all sorts of different types of cancer, terminal cancer, curable cancer, rare cancers, all sorts of cancers. But alongside that, people are going through all sorts of other crises, whether it's financial crises, whether it's fear about the environment, whether it's political concerns, social and religious concerns, mental illness. So whatever people come to me with, the healing is kind of the same, the approach is kind of the same, and I think the tools can be used universally. So whether you're someone with cancer, or whether you're someone who's got money worries, or whether you're someone who has got bipolar, or whether you're someone who has chronic fatigue, a lot of the principles that I have learned and share can be applied to everyone and anyone. And I suppose there is one more final thing I would say, is that I think it's really key that people acknowledge that there is no one way, there is only your way. And that has to be very much driven by you, by your understanding and by your willingness and by your openness. And I have always thought that if you're going through something and it's horrible and intense, if I were you, if I were in your shoes, I would try everything and anything to see if it would work. And if it didn't work, then I'd chuck it to one side and I'd go on to trying the next thing. I always think with people, if it's free, or if it's relatively cheap, or if it's accessible, give it a go. Even if you think it's completely bonkers and nonsense, you've got nothing to lose and absolutely everything to gain. And so I would really always encourage people who come to me, I would say, look, I'm about to say something completely bonkers, but just give it a try. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, fantastic, go on to the next thing. But I think it's really important to be open and to be eclectic, but to do you and not to feel pressurized to follow another person's course or path.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, there's lots in there. And I love that you bring in we're in a time of polycrisis, and we're on the back of COVID, and people are actually still trying to find some semblance of order in their lives from COVID. And we have everything else. We have a financial crisis. We have, political systems crashing, educational systems crashing, health systems that are crashing. We have climate issues that, we have wars around the world. People are having to deal with, it feels like, and hold an enormous, to bear an enormous load. And I think if I take the thin slither of health and the very orthodox approach that I found myself in with medicine, that some people will find that they have a consultant who plays a very orthodox narrow line, and others will find consultants around them who play a broader integrative approach. Ours was very narrow and didn't believe that we should try anything out of this kind of thin boundary. And for me, it became all the more important to do exactly what you just said, which is to look for other ways, follow the orthodox path for as long as it feels like it's the way, but also be open and mind and heart to other sources of guidance and support. And that has been central. So a lot of people will talk about the work we're talking about as a kind of death of the ego, or the shadow work, or unresolved trauma comes back into people's lives in some way through their health, or through relationship collapse, or through loss of job. How does the work you do support people in broader areas of their life? I know we've talked a little bit about healing, perhaps from a health perspective, but when people are going through this real kind of shadow, deep state of darkness, how does your work help hold them?
Yeah, so just two things there, I suppose I'd say. One thing is that I do want to mention that I'm a big supporter of orthodox medicine. I fly the flag for orthodox medicine. I always encourage my clients to talk to their doctor and follow their doctor's advice, and I think
Yeah.
that's important. I'm not somebody who, you know, doesn't support that in any way, shape, or form. So I think that what we have to bear in mind, all of us, is that we are very kind of holistic and multidimensional beings. We are mind, we are heart, we are body, we are spirit. And if we're dealing with a crisis, whatever that crisis might be, that crisis impacts across the board holistically on us. We might not be consciously aware of the way in which it is affecting our emotions, or the way in which it is affecting our mind, if it feels very physical, or if it is a very emotional or mental burden. We might not feel that it's taking a toll on our body, but it very probably is. So we have to approach it holistically in order to deal with it. And that requires, to a certain degree, us putting the work in, facing the issue, and also tracing the issue and seeing how it might be impacting these other parts of our life, so that we can attempt to deal with it in a kind of multi-pronged manner. And that was what I was always very admirable of you, Richard, was that you were willing to put in the work. You were willing to think, right, how is this making me feel, and how is this making me think, and how is this affecting me spiritually, and what might it be revealing to me, and what do I need to do in order to move things along? Now, I think some people aren't willing to put the work in for whatever reason. Maybe they feel that they're too busy, or they haven't got the energy. I mean, the last thing that you want to do when you're not feeling well, or when you're feeling stressed or depressed, is to contemplate your own navel, or try and dig out the inner goings on of your mind or your heart. But it's exactly the moment when those things are essential if you want to try and bring some resolution or some balance and harmony to the problem. So what I try to do is to help people look at themselves on this holistic level, and offer some suggestions about positive thinking, and some elements of kind of psychological investigation, as well as energetic investigation. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about the physical body, and exercises, and diet, and to try to encourage people to look at themselves as a whole, and to try to provide, I suppose, people with a bit of motivation, and most importantly as well, a bit of positivity. Because when we're going through it, whatever it might be, positivity is usually the first thing that goes out the window. We can plummet into a kind of more poor me state of despair. We can shake our fist at God and say, I've been such a good boy, so why are you doing this to me? Or we can try and blame it on someone else. I'm being cursed, I'm being ill-willed, it's an environmental factor because I live next to a pylon. But to a certain degree, we have to look at it and think, right, well, where is my part in this as well? What might I be doing or have done wrong that has encouraged this, or that certainly hasn't helped this? So I think we've got to take responsibility for it, but I think also we need to lean upon those people around us who are willing to offer us positivity and help. And once again, that's not always easy. We're not necessarily, all of us, designed to open ourselves to receive help. And that's, I think, probably one of the first things I would encourage people to do, is to reach out for help, and open themselves to receive help when it's offered to them.
Yeah, I love that. There's something in there about the responsibility and the being active in our own stage of staying with this darkness. And for me, I'm a psychotherapist anyway, and in some ways, I started this journey of being unwell, thinking, oh, I'm surely much better resourced than others to cope with it, and that's been tested. But for me, continuing my own therapy throughout these last 2.5 years has been vital to me, because it's given me an opportunity to unpick that very piece about how am I active in my own healing. And I don't think, well, I certainly wasn't role modeled for me as I grew up, watching my dad turn away from difficult situations and ignoring, kind of numbing out to problems and challenges. And he would always look to fix it, make it better. He would never be with his difficulty. He would never I'd never find him sitting amongst it and in it and wanting to make some sense of it. He wanted to turn away from it. And especially, I think it's much harder for men, because I don't think we are taught or encouraged to turn towards our difficulty and our darkness. I think our patriarchal systems teach us to turn away from it, because actually, in order to turn towards it, we enter this stage of enormous vulnerability and openness. And I think that's a really hard place for a lot of people to be. The other point I wanted to just to touch on is actually to mention a book by a wonderful writer called Bessel van der Kolk, called The Body Keeps the Score, which I read many, many years ago. It's just a fabulous book for understanding actually what might have occurred in our lifetimes, in order for us to have reached this place of difficulty and trauma. And that's trauma with a big T or trauma with a small t. But he talks about how the body holds it. The body keeps it like a 5-bar gate. It tallies up every bit of small t trauma that we experience. And it gets stored in the bank. It gets stored in the physical bank, which, as you've just said, that cannot not affect our emotional resources, our psychological resources, our spiritual resources. So I would encourage you, for those of you who are sitting here wanting to understand more about how have our paths led us to this place of perhaps difficulty or disturbance or despair, to check out some of his work. So Edwin, why do you think it's important that people do face towards the difficulty and the challenge rather than just the kind of Pollyanna approach? You know, the whole reason I wrote the book, which is As a Kite Falls, A Voyage Through Descent, is that I'm very aware that we have, as a society, become fixated on ascent. We are fixated on more, better, bigger, better jobs, more money, climbing higher, and this constant drive for up means that we struggle to sit within our times of descent and our times of down and difficulty, and we will all have them. So why do you think it's important that people make the step to face towards it rather than face away?
Yeah, so I suppose that the very first few things, I suppose, that pointed me towards looking at this and realizing why it was so important was interesting enough to do with my parents. So my father had a kind of massive heart episode when I was about 10 years old, and he was told that he could have another one and it could kill him. So he went into complete terror and isolation and lived the rest of his life in a room, never moving from his chair, because he was so frightened that he was going to exert himself and kill himself. And he got fatter and more immobile, and then later on had several strokes and got dementia and died. So his fear paralyzed him, and he didn't want to look at anything other than the television in front of him, and he just left everything up to the doctors to resolve. And my mom, God bless her, she was completely the opposite. But towards the end of her life, she developed macular degeneration. She became blind, and she developed a condition called Charles Bonnet syndrome, where her brain started to hallucinate to fill in the gaps in her eyesight. And she saw all sorts of horrendous things in the house. And I remember her saying to me, "Why is this happening to me? I don't deserve this." And I remember thinking, yeah, but why do you deserve anything different? You're no more special than anybody else is. So I know what you mean. You've been a wonderful, wonderful, incredible person, but the world is full of wonderful and incredible people. So it's no good shaking your fist at God, and it's no good sitting in your room and not doing anything. You've got to try to take some responsibility and to think, well, what is going on here? So by those experiences, I was always driven to think, I want to know why. I want to know why the body has stopped working, why the person has contracted this disease, why they have gone into this state of psychological paralysis, why they are shaking their fist at God, why that's suddenly giving them a chronic backache. I just found the interconnectedness of things kind of fascinating. And when I started to guide my clients or my students in these different directions, they discovered that when they then focused in on one area and discovered that actually their lower back pain had nothing to do with their sciatic nerve, but everything to do with them feeling overwhelmed in life. And when they could take steps towards feeling less overwhelmed in life, their backache disappeared. And there was this wonderful kind of domino chain reaction effect of things clearing in the body and in the mind and in the heart when they focus their energy and their attention in one particular area. And I think we're not taught to do this as a culture. We're not taught to look at ourselves in this way. And we're not taught that we have power. We have tremendous power in regards to being able to heal ourselves. I mean, science is finally cottoning on to this with their talk of the placebo effect, with their talk about how they have found ways of fooling the body into reanimating its defense against illness and regenerating and restoring itself. Finally, science is kind of thinking, well, actually, there are all these untapped resources within the body and the brain that can be used to heal the person and to help alleviate pain. But in the spiritual community, we've known that for hundreds, if not thousands of years, that we have this immense power inside ourselves. And if we begin to focus our attention in these ways, we can stimulate that power and release that power, and we can step into that power and begin to bring resolution and healing to ourselves. Interestingly enough, a client of mine, they went to their doctor the other day about some painkillers, and the doctor was explaining how these particular painkillers worked. And they said, these painkillers stimulate sections in your brain that are naturally stimulated when your attention is captivated by something you're doing, which is why when you're focusing on a problem, you don't feel the pain in your body as much, because by focusing on that problem, you're also stimulating these nerve endings in the brain that enable the pain receptors to be bypassed. And that's what this painkiller does. So how fascinating is that if we bring our attention to something else, we can actually induce a kind of painkiller reaction in our body? Why aren't we being told this by our medical team and our doctors? And it's just another indication that we have this power within us. I think when we feel ill, when we feel overwhelmed, we feel powerless. It's the first thing that we feel. We feel that we have no control over what's happening in our life. We've been completely divested of our free will and our control. But it's absolutely not the case. It's absolutely the time to step into our power and to embrace and to release that untapped resolve and resource inside us that we can use to make ourselves feel better.
One of the things that I love about you, Edwin, just one of the things is, and that has really resonated with me, is that you ground your views and ideas and philosophies in something. You ground it in things that, for me, I go, okay, that makes sense. And there will be some people either watching this evening or maybe watching it on replay who would be a bit nervous or apprehensive about working with you or someone like you. They'll think that there's some kind of weird, dark magic at play, and perhaps that will send them into a state of fear. I mean, you must hear this. You must hear this. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think the the more often that I hear this is in my own head. I know that what I do is completely bonkers. It makes sometimes zero sense. It is away with the fairies nonsense. There have been many, many times on my spiritual journey when I thought, I must be schizophrenic, I must be losing my marbles, I'm experiencing an early form of dementia. There are things that I do and I write them or I teach them, and then I'll switch off the Zoom or come out the classroom and I'll think, I have completely lost the plot. And so if I think that, and I, pretty much think that on a daily basis, I absolutely sympathize with other people who meet me who think that as well. Which is why for me it is so important to try and find opportunities to ground what I am trying to teach in some kind of model that has a scientific foundation or a physical basis of reflection or correspondence. I remember years ago, I was at a psychic fair and this man came over to the table. He was obviously a complete skeptic. And he said to this woman behind the crystal stall, how do these crystals work? And she said, inside each crystal is a tiny little fairy which comes out and sends its magical energy into your system. And I thought, woman, what are you saying? That man is going to run as fast as he can in the opposite direction. Whereas if it had come to me, I would have said, crystals release a kind of electrical energy when you put them under pressure. It's called piezoelectricity. It's the reason why we use them in computers and digital watches and CD players. And it's the same principle. We're just applying a different kind of pressure to release that same energy. And also crystals are used because they maintain a constant vibration, which is why we use them in digital watches. And we can use that same principle to correct the imbalance of vibration within our energy system. It's so much easier. I mean, it's the same thing. Magic is coming out of the crystal and it's making you feel better. But I'm giving it to him in a way in which he's going to be able to make sense of it and maybe think, I'll give that a go because it sounds like there might be some kind of reasonableness to it. So yeah, I think it is. It all sounds often bonkers and impractical and implausible. So, as teachers, we need to try and ground it in some kind of model that
Yeah.
people will understand. But also, I think, and I often find myself saying this to people, look, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Give it a go, and if it works,
That's
fantastic. And
it.
if it doesn't, move on.
So if someone was, out of all the various ways that you offer support and help and guidance, and someone wanted to know where to start, maybe they were curious, intrigued to open up their minds and hearts to a different and alternative way, where would you point them to begin?
So I think, I'm a big believer in baby steps. And I'm a big believer in foundation. So I wouldn't, if somebody was coming to it completely new, I wouldn't push them straight into the fairies live inside of crystals market. I would probably say, well, let's start with something a bit more gentle. Maybe let's have a look at Louise Hay. Let's have a look at affirmation. Let's look at the way in which the body and the mind is reflective of each other and how the body is trying to tell you something about how you're feeling or how you're thinking through its aches and pains, and how those aches and pains can then be remedied by correcting where the root of the problem is on a mental and emotional level. Because most people think, well, yeah, I can kind of understand that my thoughts and my feelings affect my body. And then once they've kind of got their teeth around that, then you can kind of nudge them into slightly, other more outrageous areas, I suppose. And I'm also, and maybe this was because I was raised in Yorkshire and I've got a very strong inner Yorkshireman in me, I'm very big into free stuff. So I would say to somebody, get yourself off to a spiritualist church, to a healing circle. There's often free healing there. Give it a try. If it works for you, then you might want to think about investing some money in having a paid healing session. And on my website, we've got loads of really great free stuff. I do absent healing for free. I'm very happy for people to contact me to go on my absent healing list. I send it out twice a week. It's completely free. And also during the pandemic, we created a series of free meditations, which are available to download for free from the website, to do with stress release and positivity and helping people with sleep. And, I say, try and rootle out the free stuff. There's loads out there now on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, and it's a great way of dipping your toe and finding out what works for you and what intrigues you. And then you might think, well, I'm going to maybe invest a bit more money in this and go and have a kind of more intense session with it.
You offer so much stuff for free, and I think Kelly's just popped the links in the chat for people to follow that. I'd encourage you to go and have a look, and even just going to one of Edwin's Sunday services, which is a beautiful way to wrap up your weekend and to enter into the week after. So I would definitely encourage that, and definitely following the free thread. Sadly, the book I wrote isn't free. I feel a little bit bad about that. Amazon aren't giving it away, but it is available on Amazon. It's sold out on day one, but it's now back in stock. So I know there's much more about this and about the story in the book. But what I'd love to do is because Edwin has agreed to close the session this evening with a short meditation. So I want to allow enough time for that and enough time to say our goodbyes. But before we do both of those, I'd really like to open up for anyone that has a question or a comment or an observation to make. Just take yourselves off of mute and come on in. Hi, Mitty.
Hi, it's so lovely to see you, Richard. And for everybody else, I'm on this call because, as I would say to Kelly and Richard, our darling Richard, I trained with him many, 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 many years ago. So I have followed his journey, both with my heart in my mouth and some great joys privately at the end, whooping in joy at the other end of my screen when I read Kelly's update. So it's marvelous to see both Kelly and Richard. Edwin, what you say is really interesting. I happen to be very open to this sort of thing, and I'm very bonkers, and I think it all works. So but I do have a friend who, funnily enough, is a young man, but has got a terrible heart condition and is currently in hospital with a gazillion tests because his heart is narrowing and his mother is in tears and all that. And they just told me about it today. So this is fortuitous, and I'm very interested. I'll be reading Richard's book. I'll be buying it, but I shall certainly be looking at your website as well. Which I think is really interesting, and I love the story and the narrative element of how you are transferring this extraordinary knowledge and expertise, because I think that's the trick. I happen to be a senior global writer, so storytelling is everything to human beings. Technicality doesn't make any difference. If it doesn't get them here, it doesn't make any difference, So thank you so much for that. And my third and final comment is, will this recording be sent to us even if we have attended or not?
It will, Mitty. It will.
Lovely. Yeah. I'm very grateful for this evening. Thank you both
so
very much.
Thank you.
If I could there was just one thing there that really jumped out at me when you were talking about your friend with his condition and about the heart narrowing. Well, I think in the world in which we live at the moment, where there is so much horror in the world, in every area, it sounds to me like the most normal thing that we would do is to get our heart to narrow, to try and protect ourselves from all the horror in the world around us. So, if, for instance, he were my client, I would be saying to him, the first thing that you need to do is to protect your heart and your emotions so that you're in a much safer space, so that you can then allow your heart to open back up again. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Edwin.
You're welcome.
Mina, you have your hand up. Can't take yourself off mute. And
Hi. Thank you both for a really wonderful and authentic conversation. Very much appreciated. I wanted to ask whether Edwin might be able to share a little bit on the concept of healing crisis, and also maybe a little bit on, just ancestral disease and passing on of that genetically.
Yeah. So healing crisis is this weird thing that happens in healing where things get worse before they get better. And sometimes it's linked to a kind of detoxification of the mind and heart and body, that the healing brings the blocking energy or the negative energy to the surface to be cleared. And once that's cleared, then the real healing can begin. But first of all, whatever is blocking the healing from entering into the person, it has to be kind of pushed up and out. And sometimes it really puts people off because you heal them and they seemingly get worse and they think, Christ, I'm not going to have any more healing from you because it just made me 10 times worse than I was to start with. And it can be a really difficult conversation trying to say to them, look, it's a really good sign, actually. And if you just push through it, you'll find that there's benefit on the other side of it. And I think often I'll say to people, look, it's a little bit like having a splinter. You know, the splinter's gone in, but we need to get the splinter out in order to get whatever might be infected out there and get the thumb healed. But getting that splinter out can be incredibly painful. But once it's out, it's gone. And then we can start to kind of make sure that the wound is healed. So once again, I think if you use an analogy sometimes, it helps people understand a little bit more about what's going on. Ancestral healing is also really interesting because our genetic ancestry, of course, goes back many, many, many generations. And sometimes we might have a condition which is ancestral in nature, but we might not be able to identify the ancestral root cause of that. And then there's another layer of ancestral illness, which can be a past life or karmic, and that we've actually inherited a condition from a previous incarnation, which is very peculiar and weird. Whereas a long time ago, maybe it would have stumped people completely, being able to heal an ancestral condition. There are now lots of different options for tackling this. There are shamanic options, there's holographic repatterning, there's working with certain crystals like apatite that work through the bones to clear ancestral conditions from our kind of genetic structure. There's psycho-spiritual ways of connecting with our ancestors and dealing with the issue at the kind of root cause in the past. So there are options, there are lots of different healing modalities out there that will tackle this. It takes a bit of a suspension of disbelief, I think. But once again, the proof of the pudding is in the eating.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think maybe we have time for one more if someone else would like to ask anything.
There's Nikki Valence there who's raising her hand, I think.
Hey, Nikki, come on.
Physical
off
hand
mute.
rather than the... I just wondered how you would go about helping someone who's got phobia of health issues. So hypochondria, but a genuine phobia of becoming unwell. Yeah,
so hypochondria is such a horribly medical word, isn't it? Back in the kind of Regency period, somebody with hypochondria would be called a valetudinarian, which I think sounds more like a badge of honor. So I think rather than saying, oh, I've got a bit of hypochondria, if you say, I'm a valetudinarian, people think they're kind of important, and it takes the sting out of the tail a little bit. So yes, there is this thing, of course, where if we bring our attention to our fears, we can actually bring them into manifestation, either within the body or within our environment. But there's no point trying to ignore them, because suppressing our fears just causes them to manifest in a different way. So we have to look at them, but we have to try and look at the root cause of them. Where did that start? Where did it begin? Was it something that was projected upon me? Was it something I witnessed from a parent? Is it a learned behavior? If we can try to think about, when was the first time I noticed that I became fearful or aware of my mortality or fearful of my health? Was it when somebody who was very dear to me died when I was very young and I realized that people died, or I realized that people got ill? If you can try and trace back the first time you remember that happening, you can get close to when your energy system picked up on that impression. And then you can either try and solve it from that point onwards, or there are other ways, once again, of releasing it from the system using certain energies, like an energy called the violet flame. A lot of people have had successes with Bach flower remedies in regards to this, or certain crystal therapy. There's emotional freedom technique, happy tapping as it's sometimes called, which is really good at releasing the energy that's locked in the energy system through acupressure points. So once again, there's lots of different possibilities that you can use that you just might not be aware of. But once you're pointed in the right direction, you can investigate them, give them a try out, and if they begin to work for you, then you can hone in on them and work with them more.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Superb. Thank you, Edwin. We have 5 minutes left, so Edwin, I would invite you. It would be an honor if you would close the session by helping us enter into a meditation.
I will. Two very quick things before I do that. One is, of course, I would say, buy Richard's book. I've got my copy here, so I'm doing my bit to plug the book. And the other thing I would say is that something that Richard's completely not mentioned is that one of the things that he did do when he was going through the thick of his stuff is created a charitable trust to help other people who were going through similar situations too. And I think that in a way was also part of Richard's healing, because when we become ill, we become very insular and self-focused. But if we can find some energy to focus on giving something to other people as well, we can set up this positive universal feedback loop of bringing more positive energy to ourselves by being more positive to other people. And I think that's really key. So I thought I'd just get that in there. Right, so if you just want to close your eyes, folks, I'm just going to pop a little bit of music on in the background. This music has been composed by my partner, Andrew Helm, and you'll find also on our website, on the free stuff page of the website, lots of Andrew's music, which is downloadable for free. It's license-free music, and it's really nice to listen to relax to. So close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, and relax, and just listen to the music and the sound of my voice. So just take a few deep breaths. Make sure your shoulders are nice and loose and relaxed. No tension in your hands or feet, and that your chair is taking your full weight. Become still and calm. I want you to try to become aware of the space around you in the room. It might feel like empty space, but it's actually full of energy and presence. These invisible presences, unseen and unheard, are there for you. We all have different names for them: God, Goddess, Guardian Angel, Guide. We might think of them of those people who we've lost, who've gone before us, but who we know remain around us, watching over us and guiding us. As I'm speaking now, they're drawing closer to you. You might begin to feel the air become thick with their presence, warm with their energy and love. They place their hands upon your shoulder. It is a soft and gentle weight, not heavy, not encumbersome, but loving and reassuring. And that warmth and that love passes through your bones and your muscle and your blood into your heart and your spirit. And inside that warmth and that presence, there is a message, a simple message, but one that you must hear. You are not alone. You are loved. You are not alone. Open yourself to that simple message, to that presence and that power. Fall back into it, lean into it, and let it hold you, let it catch you, let it wrap itself around you, and let it give you what you need. Reassurance, protection, healing, power, strength. Let it fill you with what your spirit cries out for at this moment in time. You are not alone. You are loved. You are not alone. You are loved. You are not alone. Give thanks to that presence and allow it to linger, and know that it's there for you whenever you have need of it. All you need to do is bring your attention to it and draw it near through your need and your willingness to receive. Now take then a few deep breaths. Feel the chair beneath you and the ground beneath you. Give thanks. And when you're ready in your own time, open your eyes and return.
Edwin, thank you so much. And God damn, Andrew Helm's composition is so good.
Yeah, just don't let him know, because he gets a terrible big head.
Oh no, I am going to send a message and tell him. So that his music is just wonderfully evocative. So Edwin, thank you for this evening, for agreeing to come and have this conversation. I guess bigger than that, thank you for the way in which you've held me and my family in the last few years in the way that you do. I have enormous gratitude to you. So from me, thank you. And for everyone else who's given time this evening, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing this with us. I hope there's something that just reaches inside and touches you in some way that you can take away from the last 60 minutes. So Edwin, any final words from me? I just bid you all a good evening and send you off with lots of love.
Yeah, just one final thing that I would say is that one of the things that really impressed me about Richard's book is that in his thanks, he thanks his dog, Royston. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge that the help and assistance that comes to us from the world isn't always from our two-legged individuals, but sometimes it's from our four-legged friends as well. I don't know what I'd do without my dog, I'll tell you. So, yeah, thank you, Royston, for all your help as well.
Enormous joy bringer. Thank you, everyone. Lots of love.
Thanks for coming.
Lots of love. Bye-bye. Stay
Bye,
safe.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye bye.